All right. So once again, welcome everyone. My name is Chris May. I am one of the founders of PyRVA, and as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about an introduction to object-oriented programming. Easy for me to say. Um, so to start with, I think it's good to define things, right? So what is object-oriented programming? And essentially, it's a style of programming that has kind of evolved over the decades. The big idea is that code is organized into small, usually reusable objects, and so your code is, creating these objects and talking to them, asking them to do things, calling the functions or methods on the objects, and and one of the great things about it is that because it's kind of evolved over decades and people have had a lot of problems along the way, a lot of smart people have kind of created some great guidelines to help us write better code. One of the interesting things is though, Python is not necessarily an object-oriented programming language. Python is multi-paradigmal, which means you can write object-oriented, you can write functional, you can write procedural, you can combine them all together in one program. It doesn't matter, But I think that knowing object-oriented programming and especially knowing how Python is created to use, how think of this, the unique ways that Python does object-oriented programming can really help you make better code, essentially write better programs. I realized I thought I had a slide in here. It might be a little bit later, but oh no, I have it right there. Yeah, I didn't even see it. So to write in an object-oriented style in Python, you need to write classes. And classes, I think, I don't know about you, but for me, classes is something that took me years to really understand. And I was even a little bit intimidated by classes when I first started out. And so I want to do just a little bit of introduction into classes. And I just want to pause. I was looking to see. I thought somebody might have added a question, but I didn't see it in chat. So when I think about the way, like when I teach people Python, I realized I didn't introduce myself. I apologize. My name is Chris May. I did say I was one of the founders of PyRVA. I am a Python technical coach. I'm also a full stack developer. I've been writing Python for over 15 years. And I'm excited to share with you this because this is something I wanted to learn and took me a while to learn. And I want to give you guys the shortcuts so you can kind of understand classes and use them and enjoy them. Deanne asked, why was I intimidated by classes? Honestly, when I started learning Python, there was a very popular video out there that was entitled Stop Writing Classes. And watching that video, the guy was essentially reacting against a lot of the people who were coming into Python were coming in from Java, and they were making classes all over the place when functions would have done just fine. And so that video and my I didn't really understand what classes were. Like there was a lot of like extra syntax and extra stuff about them that I didn't understand, and I'll kind of go through some of that in this presentation. But yeah, that kind of pushed me against learning about classes. I did a lot of functional, well, not technically functional. I used a lot of functions. I wasn't in a functional kind of programming paradigm, but I just used a lot of functions. So I mentioned I'm a Python technical coach. I was a Python trainer as well. So I've trained a number of people on how to use Python. And when I start teaching people Python, I know when a lot of people learn Python, they learn a couple things first. And usually those are three things: integers, floats, and strings. I think this is really smart, because these are kind of I think of them as like kind of the atoms of Python. They are like the little pieces of data that we use for everything, right? Richard says bool. That's a good point. Booleans are in there too. Yeah, Booleans are in there too. But I have some particular ideas about integers, floats, and strings that we'll see later. But they're I feel like they're kind of simple. They're Yeah. I feel like they are. I'd like to say they're easier to catch on. It might take a little bit if you're new to programming, it might take a little bit longer to understand like what's a string and why do we call it a string as opposed to text, or what's the difference between a float and an integer. But they're kind of relatively simple. Next, people usually teach like something a little bit more complicated. And for many classes I've been a part of, I find that the next level are kind of lists and sets and dictionaries. These are what I like to call them are containers. These are things that hold other things. You can have a list of integers or a list of a number of things, but the idea is like they collect things and they hold things for you. And then people start learning about functions. And I feel like functions appear simple at first, right? Because you have a little bit of code and you pass some arguments in the function and things happen. But like this is where things start getting pretty complicated, right? It's like as a user, I feel like especially for me when I was learning Python in my early years of Python, I thought of functions as like kind of little black boxes where, something happened. Ooh, pardon me, sorry. Oh my gosh, hey Mason. I just saw that you joined. Um, um, Sorry, I got thrown. I have a little your stream is running warning in the top corner, but like anyway, functions I felt like are little black boxes where you put in inputs, you get outputs, but you don't really know what's necessarily happening inside the function unless you open up and read the source code. For example, like I used to use the sorted function a lot. I still use it a lot, but I had no idea how it sorts things. Right? I've read articles about how it sorts things, but I never really thought about it. I just kind of grabbed it. I was like, I need to sort a couple things. I'm going to use sorted. I wonder if that's similar to anybody else. But in Python, functions are everywhere. There are many built-in functions. They're very handy. Additionally, we install functions from packages. A lot of these packages have specialized functions that we can use to help us get things done. And I think that while it can be challenging to understand what a function might do when somebody else writes it, I feel like in some ways it's even harder when you're writing your own function. Because it's like, how do you know, like what should the parameters be? What should be the code inside of it? Well, if I have a really long function, where should I split it up? Are there better ways to like write this code than how I've written it? And I feel like it could take a while for you to kind of understand functions and how to write elegant functions. And I've mentioned all this, and we haven't even gotten to classes yet, right? So like I feel like classes is, at least for me, it took me a while to really feel comfortable with everything short of classes, right? The functions, lists, sets, dictionaries, all that stuff. I kind of felt like it took me a while to get those locked in, and then I finally started to learn classes. And that's what we're going to talk most about today is classes. So what are classes? In Python, we use a class to essentially define a custom object. And by that, I mean like defining a class allows us to specify how an object, like a custom object, behaves, what data it has in it, how it holds, how people can interact with it, and how it communicates with users. So to understand this a little bit more, I want to talk about classes you might use every day, like integers, floats, and strings. As I mentioned before, I consider these to be the atoms of Python. They're the primitive data types representing the data that our users want. We pull them out of the databases, we stick them in reports, we put them up on the screens. And that's because they are very tightly bound to the data they represent. So in case you're new or not as familiar, floats can represent any number out there, from decimals to large numbers. Integers represent whole numbers. Strings represent text. And these classes, while they are kind of the building blocks and the atoms, as I said, they I feel like in some ways they behave similarly because they are like data. They are the data that we care about. But in other ways, they behave very differently. So, for example, let's say that we have some Python code and we create a variable with a float of 25.2 and a string called name, and it's cloud with a space in it. So if we take weight and we add the number 9 to it, the integer 9 to it, we get 34.2. And if we do that to name, we get an error. Because, as this says, type error can only concatenate string, not int to string. So essentially, this plus symbol to things like floats and integers, it means math. It means add. But a string means it means something else, right? In the case of a string, it means how to concatenate or join strings together. And so strings don't know how to join themselves to ints. And as a result, Python throws a type error. Additionally, let's talk about multiplication. If we do the same thing with weight and name and do a times 2, a star 2, times 2 to weight doubles the value that we think of. It's 50.4. But if we do that to the string, it duplicates the string. And so I bring this up because mainly for the behavior. When you think about classes, I feel like there's two main driving forces behind classes, and is their data and their behavior. Each class interacts with a unique set of data and has its own behaviors. Other classes we are familiar with, may be familiar with, are sets, lists, and dictionaries. These, I feel like integers, floats, and strings are classes that are known for their data, right? This is very closely associated with their data. I feel like sets, lists, and dictionaries, on the other hand, are much more closely associated with their behavior. Because I feel like in general, it's really rare to mention like how do ints behave, right? You just kind of think of them as numbers, you add them together, you divide them. Same with, floats. But sets are known because they only hold deduplicated data, and they're really quick. If you want to like see if something is in a set, it's like super quick to let you know if it's in the set. Lists hold items in the order in which you've added them. And if you want to get something out of the list, you either have to like know the index, and, the number, the position in the list, or you have to loop through the list to look through each item. And dictionaries are in some ways similar to lists in that they keep things in the order in which you've added them, but they allow you to access the data through keys. And they also have really quick ways, like a list can, it takes longer to identify if something is in the list, but a dictionary in the set, it's really quick to know if something is in a dictionary or a set. All right, so we've covered classes. We've talked about classes that are known for their data, classes that are known for their behavior. I'm going to pause for a second. I saw a question come in. Is there a relationship between dictionaries and sets? There actually used to be a very strong relationships. I want to say it was, I'm not sure if it was in Python 3 or Python 2, but like for a while, the dictionary keys were sets. But they're slightly different now. But they act very similarly in that dictionary keys, you can only have, actually they work very similarly. So I actually wonder if there are any differences. Does anybody know if there are differences between dictionary keys and sets? We could check it in later, but they are.
Yes, there are. They appear to have the same behavior, which you've been observing. But remember that a dictionary's keys, or rather, a dictionary is now ordered by the appearance of its keys.
Right.
Whereas
yes.
a set, Now, this is fairly recent, so I'm not quite sure which version of Python 3 point. I'm going to guess 3.5, but don't quote me on that.
I was thinking
But in the old days, you couldn't rely on the order of keys in a dictionary.
Yeah. Good call. Well said.
Hi,
Yeah,
Dean.
oh, hi.
You're referring to you're referring to the insertion order, right?
Can you say that again?
I think DN was referring to the insertion order, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. Sets don't remember their insertion order because they are unordered. Like at least in Python, but other languages have ordered set, I guess. I don't know other languages. I'm not sure.
I know the standard library set is not ordered. I'm not sure if they're, like, I feel like you could probably install a package that has an ordered set.
I feel IT plus Java, there could be something called ordered. I feel like I've heard it, but I'm not sure. I don't know those languages.
Yeah. And Python has other types of sets too, because there's like frozen set, so you can't change them as well.
True,
yeah.
but none of them remember the order though.
Right. Exactly.
That is where I feel when you join these meetings, few people, they code in different languages, so I hear things. Though I only use I'm only learning Python, I feel like someone mentioned about ordered and unordered. I don't know, was it with respect to sets? I'll probably look it up and share.
Yeah, but you're right. Sets are unordered. Dictionary keys are ordered in the order that you've added them.
Yeah.
Unless you explicitly sort them, in which case it creates a new dictionary with the keys ordered. They inserted in the order, whichever order you sort them in. Okay, somebody did say you can pip install ordered set, so you can have.
So that is in Python itself. We have ordered set then.
Only if you install it with pip. So it's a package that somebody's made.
But not part of the language itself, like standard library.
Right. In theory, I mean, you could like create a dictionary that all have the same, values. Like you can use a dictionary keys similar. Actually, no, you can't. I just realized you can't use like set operations on dictionary keys, because that's another difference with sets, is you could have two sets and you can say like, tell me the members that are in both sets or not in both sets or stuff like that.
Yeah, for this I came across a term which actually DN had mentioned it to me earlier, because I know him from before. Dictionary, it is like you say list like, so it's like set like, but it is not set. The dictionary keys.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you can't perform the operation.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to.
I hope I've said it correctly. If not, DN can correct me.
No, I think you said it right. Like set like, absolutely. Yeah, well done. I did want to. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, you.
Thanks.
This is Martins. I was just going to chime in. Yeah, like Java does actually have a sorted set, but and I mean, these lower level items, you learn them in school and you forget about them after a while. But I think that there were some operations you could run on sets to make them sorted, but that wasn't included in the basic set. I could be incorrect, but now as of like Java 8, like they have like a sorted set item.
Nice. Yeah. I have not done much in Java, so I wouldn't know. Oh, okay. DN says that dictionary keys return something which is list-like as opposed to set-like, which that actually, now that you say that, that makes a lot more sense to me, because like I feel like dictionary keys, when you're creating the dictionary, are more set-like in that there can only be one. It needs to be hashable. But when you ask a dictionary for its keys, you get a list-like thing back.
Because you probably want to iterate through that list at some point when you get the keys. So that's kind of, it all depends on what you want. Usually you're not iterating through a set. You're just trying to determine membership and use obviously you have membership in lists, but it's a little bit more efficient in sets just because they're designed for that.
Yeah. I also want to mention Mason shared that there's a fantastic talk from Brandon Rhodes about this at PyCon 2017 called The Dictionary Mightier that y'all should check out. I heartily endorse that. Any talk you can see from Brandon Rhodes is a great talk, including the one that he gave at PyTexas last year, Mason, that Mason hosted. Thanks for hosting that. And in case anybody else can get to Texas in a couple months, PyTexas is a great conference to go to. Mason does a great job of hosting people, and he's a fun guy. So if you get there he goes. He put it in the chat. So if you have it, it's April 19th through 21st. So it's a weekend in Austin, and I highly recommend going if you can. And also checking out any Brandon Rose talk on YouTube that you can. Dr. PWJ put that talk in the chat as well. So making life easier for you guys. All right. Well, thanks for the collaboration and the input. It was really great to hear from you guys. Next in the talk, I want to talk about why we would want to use a class. Oh, nice. Sorry, I saw Mason just said that was his first PyCon, and it was his favorite talk by far because Brandon is a great storyteller. He absolutely is. I agree. Now, why would we want to use a class? So, as programmers, there are 4 things. I did say 4. Good. We want to do. We want to solve the problem at hand. We want to write understandable code, because the more understandable our code is, the harder it is for bugs to hide. We want to write code that is not hard to maintain, and we want our code to communicate to future developers the intent of our code. And classes are an integral part of helping us, or maybe I should say integral. They are a tool that we can leverage to accomplish these. Richard says you're asking for a lot. Yes, it does take a lot of practice and a lot of time, but I'd say these are kind of ideally what we would want to do. And you don't have to use classes to do it, but I feel like, as you'll see here in a few minutes, like they're a way to make your code very expressive and a way to protect your code from getting into situations that you wouldn't want it to be in. So once again, classes, they are things with state or data and behavior. And so when you decide that you want to build a class, I would say there are 3 things you want to keep in mind and think about when you're creating a class. What data does the class hold? How should this class, the object that this, if I want to create an object out of this class, how should this behave? And then what thing does an instance of this object represent? And that is particularly important for naming your class. So let's start writing a class together. So I want to go through what we just talked about and create objectives for our class. I want an instance of this object to represent the idea of a rectangle. So that's what it represents, right? It's going to represent a rectangle. With regards to the data, this object must know about its width and its height. And then regarding behavior, a user cannot create the object unless she provides the width and height, or he or she provides the width and height. So we're going to take these in order. First, let's create something that will represent the idea of a rectangle. And to do that in Python, one way we can do that is this class rectangle pass. This doesn't do anything, but it does represent the idea of a rectangle, right? It is named rectangle. If you were to see this in code, you would know, okay, well, this is a rectangle, right? That's one of the good things and hard things about naming things. If we wanted to, we could literally create a rectangle, an instance of this rectangle class. And if we call type on it, it will say it is a rectangle. Yes. Yeah. Moving on. Now we want a rectangle to know about width and height. One way we can do that is to add width and height to the rectangle. And by doing this, we could now create a rectangle and say, if we were just create it, its width and height would be 0, which honestly isn't really a good number for a default for a rectangle. But we can now say your height is now 5, your width is 5, your height is 3, and then we can print it out and see that the width is indeed 5. Moving on, we now want to make sure that a rectangle cannot exist unless the person says how wide and how tall the rectangle is, right? Because like a width of 0 just doesn't work as a rectangle. It's a line. Or I guess you could say, it's a one-dimensional thing. So I'll call it a line. To do that, one way we could do that is to leverage something in it's a point. One thing we can do to do this is leverage a part of the standard library called data class. And what this does is it essentially, like, before data classes were a part of the standard library, we'd have to do a lot more writing of code in order to enforce the idea of a rectangle has a width and a height, and that it always that you have to pass that in. So anyway, all to say is, like, data classes, you may not be familiar with them, but like I feel like they're a great way to kind of, if you're just wanting to create a simple class. Actually, most of my classes start out as data classes because it's just easier to write, and it's a really nice thing. Now, if we were to try to create a rectangle and not give it a width or a height, we get a type error just like this. It says that rectangle init is missing 2 required positions, width and height. So this is a great way to say, like, to enforce that, right? This is enforcing we need a width and a height. And so now if we add rectangle 5 and 3, it will return, it'll say, like, look, you have a rectangle. Its width is 5, height is 3. And similarly, like, if in the last one, if we create a rectangle with width of 5 and a height of 3 and pass it into a string to say, like, what's the width, we get a width of 5. Now I want to look at, so Latho says that the data classes has the width and height kind of included in the constructor, and that is correct. Looks like.
Chris.
Yeah.
If I may ask, I have been doing it that way, right? The self-constructed, the init constructor that we have in Python.
I'm sorry, what about it?
Init or the initial constructor method, right? I would include it as part of that if anything is mandatory. So instead of that, I could also do it this way using data class.
You can, especially if it's just for, like, the inclusion, right? When I use data classes, I start off with data classes, right? If I have a class that has, specific data, especially if it's like holding data or has functions that kind of interact with that data in a kind of a, like, I want to say a simple way, like, data classes are great because you don't have to define the init function. And that's one of the, there are at least three functions, actually probably like 5 or 7 functions that data classes write for you. For an example, where it says where we create the rectangle, I don't know if my mouse is showing up. It is not showing up, but like under, sorry, I thought it would show up. It's not showing up. So I have like the bracket rectangle 5,3. When Python returns what that does, it says rectangle width equals 5, height equals 3. That's something that data classes does as well. So it's a quick and easy way of as DN says, it saves a lot of boilerplate because it just does a lot for you, so that you don't have to, like, say write an init function or a string function or a repr function or stuff like that. You will want to create an init function if you want to like say, like, for instance, let's say that we want to allow people to pass in, say, a string that's, say, 5. An init function, we could take in the arguments of width and height and convert them into floats. if we wanted to, or something like that to kind of help the user, create a rectangle, kind of give them more options to more flexibility to create a rectangle. Or if you need some other kind of validation too, like if you, like, for instance, like let's say that you don't want a rectangle that's more than 20 in width, just to throw something out there, I would want to create a init function to enforce that.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
I will
absolutely.
Yeah, I have to start using them. I haven't looked into them yet.
Absolutely. Yeah. I feel like it's funny, like do I have it here? It's over there. There's a great book that I have over on the shelf over there, and I can't pull it out because it's way over there. Robust Python really put this into my head about how great data classes are, because like he has this great grid, for lack of a better word, to say like when you would want to use dictionaries versus data classes versus full-blown classes versus enums and stuff like that. If you want to read a book and learn a lot about how you can program Python effectively, I highly recommend Robust Python.
Data classes kind of remind me a lot of C structs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not as familiar with C structs, but I feel like our data classes are a little heavier weight than the structs.
Oh, the C struct, I know one thing, if I may say, that is, it's like it is a construct that can hold heterogeneous data types in them, if I'm not wrong. Like array is like same data type, right? Like homogeneous. I hope that's how we define it in C.
I'm pausing because I don't know C that well, but
Me too, but I just remember the basic thing about struct, and then there is enum, struct, and then arrays, right? If I were to compare them, I would say it that way. Though enum is not, you don't have to compare it. It's a little bit different, right?
yeah, like enums are a restricted set of options, I guess. That's how I think of them. They're like you're defining like, yeah, these are the options in some dimension that you can use.
Yeah, I shouldn't have brought up enum. It's just array and struct is what I wanted to compare, because one is homogeneous, another is heterogeneous. So that's one way to think about it. Maybe others have a better way to define the C struct data type.
Yes, I would agree that a C struct is very similar to this, but a struct by nature, by default, doesn't have any methods attached to it. The data class adds methods. You don't see them here, but there are a lot of implemented methods that are there. Now, a struct, you can implement methods for it. There's no restriction on that, but people generally don't. They just use it as like you said, Lush, a homogeneous set of data, basically, to pass data around.
Oh, I must ask one question regarding that point. I don't know who mentioned it. I
Dr.
only
P.
heard a voice.
It was Paul. Yeah.
Yep, Paul.
Paul?
Go ahead.
Okay. So the question is, because C was the first language I dabbled with, right? Though I haven't been using it after that, I still somehow remember certain aspects of it. I'm myself amazed. But I've used struct. I didn't know that we could create our own methods. Like, if you don't mind me to just say briefly, what do we use to do that? Like,
Create
do we
methods
just
on a
go
struct.
on? Yeah.
It's very similar to defining a class in C++, because a C++ class is really based on a struct. The only difference, the difference between a C++ class and a struct is that all struct methods, all struct variables are public by default, and for C++ classes, the variables are private by default. But they're based on the same method. A C++ class is based off a struct, and so you can actually add methods just like you would to C++
Okay.
class.
Oh, now I'm recalling. So it's like the data is just those, like how we have the variables and stuff, we have them in struct, and then I can include methods in there.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, I think I'd forgotten that aspect. Now I can recall. Yeah, that makes sense. Now I can see why you called it similar to data class. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. So speaking to what Paul mentioned, so far we've got a rectangle that essentially, like, I'll say a minimal rectangle, right? We need a width and a height to create a rectangle. And in a way, you can say that's a behavior because it's enforcing that. But I want to add now. I now want to add and show you how to add more behavior to an object. So we're gonna say we're gonna rotate a rectangle, right? So I think of this as like if we're making like a page layout program, and someone puts a rectangle on, maybe we want to optimize it so you can rotate it 90 degrees. And so starting with our data class, our rectangle class, one way we can optimize this, one way we can allow users to rotate by 90 degrees is to do this. And so this is adding what they call a method onto the class. A method, the way I think about it is just it's a function that lives on a class. I think that's pretty much the main difference of it. Though there may be some people who may say like it interacts with classes more than just, it's not just a function that just lives in a class, but it like kind of knows about the class and it knows in. I feel like probably, but I feel like as long as you know that it's a function on a class that is called a method, then I'm happy. And to show this working in, let's see code that actually does this, right? So if we create a rectangle that's 5 by 7, and we ask Python to kind of show us what that is, it says rectangle width 5, height 7. We rotate it, and now it's width 7, height 5. The interesting thing about methods in particular, is that self parameter. And this was something that, like, I think confuses a number of people. I was definitely confused by it for a while because it's like, what's with it, right? It turns out, like, if you're writing classes, self is key. In this case, it allows that function to like reach in and know about the data that the class holds. Like that's kind of the way, in a way, you could say like that denotes that this data, the width, is the class's width. And to kind of explain that a little bit better, I want to add another piece of behavior, which is to add margin. And so one way we could do that with our code is like this. We create a method with 3 parameters: self, width, and height. And I'm going to even allow things kind of like, I like the idea of like giving users an option. And so let's say that if you want to add equal margin around the rectangle, you don't have to type in a width and a height. You can just pass in one argument. And so that's what this does. And in particular, I want to highlight how, like, in the body of this method, we have variables called width and height, and we have variables that are self.width and self.height. And this is one reason why self is so great, is because it prevents name collisions, right? Like, sorry, I just noticed somebody specifically said, I get confused with self. Can you please let me know what we cannot do when we do not use self in a class definition, so that I can then get to know what it's for? Yeah. Or what including it offers. Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like it's especially this. If you look at this code, if we didn't have self in front of like self.height, it would not change the rectangle itself. In fact, like in theory, you could say it would do nothing. Maybe I'm trying to think. Like, yeah, why don't I do a little example.
Chris,
Yeah.
for this point, sometimes I'm trying to recall now when I sort of dabbled with that self thing. If we can create objects even without a self, right? It allows you to do that.
You can. Yeah. In fact, let me share. I'm gonna stop.
Because
sharing.
there is one basic thing that you can't do when you don't have self, and that sort of restricts you. Even though you have a class, you can't do much with it. I felt that was important, but I'm not remembering now.
So give me a second. Oh. Whoops. Oh my goodness. I've got my there we are. That's what I'm trying to do. Class rectangle. Can you guys read this? Is this too small? Make it a little bigger.
That's better.
Cool. All right, so we got width and we're doing. Oh, let's do add margin. Get rid of that rectangle. So if we do not include self, and let's say like, let's just even say print like, I'm trying to think of how to do it. Like, so the way that our function is, it's like, so if height is none, then height is equal to plus width, and then width is equal to width. So if we were to run this, cool. Oh, haha. Let's try it one more time. Oh, that's funny. It must be pulling from an old Scratch or something like that. Huh. I'm so confused as to why it's pulling this in. Anyway, so if we were to do so, that's so fascinating. I wonder why this was working earlier when
It's running an older program. You're entirely correct. So why don't you right click on the editor tab and run?
I think
Got a Scratch at the top there. Scratch 2.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah,
I just saw that it was importing some code that I had somewhere else. So sorry about that. So if we were to do this, R is a rectangle that's a width of 3 and height of 5. And if we were to do r.add margin, let's just do 3. Okay, so this is the issue. This is the one big issue, is if you don't include self, Python expects the first parameter to be self. And so what you actually probably see, I bet this is what PyCharm is telling us. Yeah. Well, it's saying that usually the first method of a parameter of a method is named self. I don't know, is this coming across? It is not showing in the video. So unfortunately, like PyCharm's showing a very helpful
Oh, we can take the Wiggy. Is that the word? The Wiggy line?
the wiggly line. Yeah.
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 Wiggy
PyCharm
line.
is just using that to say, this little pop-up that says usually the first parameter is called self. And in Python, it doesn't matter what you call the first parameter, but Python reserves that parameter to be the thing, whatever you call it. Like you can call it this, you can call it width. Python is saying that is going to be the instance of the rectangle that you're working on. And so that's why like width plus width is saying that Python doesn't know how to add two rectangles together. Now you can do something. This is going a little bit past where I want to be, but you can add a. Oops. static method decorator onto this, and that does what I, oops. Oh yeah, there. Well, that does what I was trying to do before, which is hard to do rectangle. Oh, and add margin. Oh, right, because I'm sorry, I just
They're
realized.
class variables now. Those are
Yeah.
instance variables. You can't really refer to them. You have to pass them
Right.
in.
And is not none, I should say. That's also where I'm. Do it one more time. So R is equal to rectangle and get rid of all those extra spaces. And if we R dot add margin, it does nothing. And if we do R, it's the same. Because this function, it's essentially it lives on the class, but it doesn't know anything about the class. It doesn't know about anything of the inside data. And so that's why the self is so important. So like you can, if you don't use self, essentially I would suggest using the static method. And that's essentially just saying like, I'm going to have for convenience sake, I'm going to put this method onto this class, even though it doesn't know anything about the data inside the class, but it just, works well. But definitely I would say most of the time you want to go ahead and put class in there. Why is this squiggling? Oh yeah, okay. And so it's funny. Oh, I'm sorry. I put class. I meant
You mean self.
Yeah, thank you. And now PyCharm is giving me the squiggly line under add margin because it's saying, you know what, this function might be a static method because it's not using the self parameter. So now we can change this to self.height and self.width. And now if we rerun this in the console, we do R is equal to a rectangle, and we say add margin 3, and we ask for R again. Now it's, oh, well, my logic is not right. I should do it the way that the slide that I shared before had it, but whatever. My logic is off. But the point is that yeah, self is absolutely required if you want to interact with anything on the class, especially, mostly the data of the class. Does that make sense? I forgot. Was it? I think. Did she drop?
I think it
Oh,
was
there you are.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this makes sense. So it's better to include self. So as we want to usually modify or do something, right?
Yeah. And I don't know. I think most IDEs that I've used will automatically, just include it just like that, just to make it easier on you. Because it's like if you're in a class and you're writing a function, like yeah, I would say start with self, and then let your IDE tell you, oh, this might be a static function. In which case, like especially if you do return 2 + 2 just as a something, like PyCharm is now telling me this might be a static method because it's not using the self variable to connect with the class. So I can tell it, oops, I hit the wrong button. I can tell it, go ahead and make it static. And so it'll handle that for you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it
Oh.
does. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is one of those things, like I think it takes, especially if you start playing with it in code, like it'll help you understand a little bit more. Because it took me, a little while, and honestly, it took PyCharm. Like I used to use Sublime Text a lot, and it didn't include a lot of those things. But like that static method, like the ability for PyCharm to say like, hey, this function's not using the self parameter. You want to turn it static? And I was like, that's what static methods are. Oh my gosh, this makes so much more sense now.
Weird. I don't know. I just got back. I'm sorry. What is this add margin thing? Width,
Yeah.
float, height, float. Float can be a none.
Yeah, so it cannot. This is kind of a like technically I would probably do like
0.0. You mean?
what I'm trying to do is
Oh, I see. Comma. It could be optionally a float or a none. Gotcha.
yeah.
And
The
then
idea yeah.
you have a if height is not none.
So okay,
Okay.
hold on one second. Let me show you the real code because I just kind of threw this together. Where is it? Here. Oh, wrong one. Let's try it one more time. Where is it? Sorry, I'm trying to find why. There it is. Okay. There we go. That's the real code. I just was trying to retype this code into PyCharm and I messed up. Is that making more sense?
Yeah, it makes more sense.
Okay. Live coding
Why?
is not one of my best skills.
It's okay. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I have also the same problem with naming. Naming sometimes can be difficult and confusing because you have a width that you define inside the class, then you have width that you define inside the parameters. Sometimes it can be confusing which one you're calling. So that's why you're using self in order to make sure you know which one you're calling. Without the self, you don't know which one. So that's good.
Yeah, 100%. In fact, for a while, I struggled to come up with new names for variables because I didn't want to like have the clashing of like, self.height versus height.
Yeah. So for example, in a parameter, you could have used margin underscore width, margin underscore height. And at work, usually we try not to avoid equal none. The reason is we want to force a user to declare them. But that's just our style.
Yeah. Yeah. In this case, I was giving the user the option, like, let's say if you wanted to add equal height around the rectangle, I wanted to be able to give the user the option, just pass in one number instead of having to pass in the same number twice. Cool. Well, we're definitely digging in good on some of these details. And I'm trying to remember why I have this next slide, so I'm just going to show it. Okay, so I think this was the accidental duplication slide, but this shows more of what we essentially were just doing, but like adding margin to different sizes. But additionally, there was one other thing. So I for years I would see this specific kind of error and I didn't understand it. And I'll just go ahead and show it to you. So if you pass in, like in this case, we're passing in 3 arguments, right? We're adding a margin 1, 2, 3, but Python throws an error that says, hey, the add margin function takes either 2 or 3 parameters, but you've passed in 4. And I'm like, I didn't pass in 4, I passed in 3. See, 1, 2, 3, there are 3 parameters. But Python kind of injects that self parameter in there as a way to say, like, this function, it has, as the connector into the kind of inside of the class. Now I just realized why I had there was an image that I was debating about using, and I felt like it was too complicated, or it complicated the matters more. But I might share it here in a few minutes. But yeah, but to drive this point home a little bit, I'm gonna like pull this down and share. So like you can see here, there are 1, 2, 3 parameters in the add margin function itself: self, width, and height. Those are 3 parameters. And so with Python kind of injecting self in there, like whenever you create a rectangle, that's what adds that 4th parameter in the bottom part where it says add margin 1, 2, 3. That self is kind of like a surprise parameter that's in there. So all this to say is, if you ever run into an issue where you see an error that says it expected a certain number of arguments, but you were given more or less, make sure you account for self in that. All right, let me just double check, see. Okay. Actually, you know what? Yeah, no, I'm going to move forward. I'll explain later if we have more questions about it. There's one other piece of behavior, or another way of programming with classes that I want to touch on briefly. And I'm going to do that, I'm going to talk about the idea of area. All right. So if you have a rectangle, I know many of us in school were taught like you can calculate the area that the rectangle covers by multiplying the width times the height. And so if we given a rectangle, how can we add some way of finding its area? Well, one way we could do that is by creating a method just like this, called area, and return self.width times self.height. And this is great. You know, this is I would say like perfectly wonderful, great standard way to do that. And to show that it works, we'll open up the REPL and create a rectangle that's 3 by 5, ask for its area, and Python will return back 15. But there's one way we can kind of make this better. Because when I think of an area of a rectangle, I don't think, hey, rectangle, I want to call a function on you, right? I don't think of the area as a function that lives on the rectangle. I think of the area as like a property of the rectangle, right? So if I could drop those parentheses is essentially what I'm thinking, and just say r.area and have that return 15. That just makes sense to me, right? Because like the area of a rectangle is a like inherent property of a rectangle. And so in Python is such a flexible language that allows you to do that. And the way you do that is by adding the property decorator on top of a method. And so the difference is kind of, in some ways, it's pretty subtle. But if you're if you're interacting with a class that you didn't create, I feel like it really kind of makes it's really nice, because it's just like accessing the width or the height. The area is like kind of promoted up to that level. So it's no longer a function, even though technically it is. It now feels like, you know, an attribute of the rectangle, just like width and height. And and one thing I love about area properties as well is, like, let's say that, you know, given a rectangle, if we were to change the width, so like change the width 3 to 5 and now ask for its area, it's now 25. So that's one thing I love, is that it's great for, like, say, calculated values, where it's like, if it's, you know, an area is great, right? It's tied to the width and the height. It's not something that it feels like you need to keep calling to like get the newest thing. Or no, what I'm trying to say, yeah, it's like it's a calculated variable, right? I feel like it's a good way to say it. And if you want to use a property on the class, there are a couple things you need to keep in mind. Two things in particular. The method, in order for it to be a property, the method can only have one parameter, and that's self, and it must return a value. Yeah. I see somebody is saying, what does area equals 13 do? Oh, that's a good point. So Paul, Dr. PWJ, sorry, I keep saying PJW, my dyslexia. So he asked, what would happen if you were to say r.area is equal to 13? And why don't I pull up our little thing from before? Because he brings up a really good point. All right, so if we were to do at property def area So, oops. PyCharm's trying to be helpful for me. All right, cool. So now if we run this in the console and we do r is equal to, actually, let's just hit back up, right? R is equal to rectangle r dot area is not callable. I did it to myself. All that r dot area is 15. So if we do r dot width is equal to 5 and do r dot area, it's now 25. And if we were to do r dot area is equal to 50, we throw an exception. And this is also so good because, like, if you think about it conceptually, it makes sense that you, like, and I don't know, to me, like in a page layout program, it makes sense that you can change the width of a rectangle. But I can't think of, like, how can I say change the area? You know, right? Like I can't say I want now I want the area to be 50. And you know, what would the width and height do? Like, we'd have to figure out that's just a hard problem, right? And so Python, by default, if you just use a property decorator, Python protects that property, that attribute, from being written to. So you can't overwrite, in this case, what area means, what area is defined to be. All right, I'm going to pause briefly for any questions about this. And now one final aspect of classes in Python. And this is where object-oriented programming in Python, I mean, honestly, I feel like we've already covered some special things about how classes behave in Python, but this is where things get really cool. Python allows you to opt in to certain enhancements. To show you an example of that, I want to add the behavior of sorting. So if you think of rectangles, like, does it make sense to sort rectangles? They're kind of weird, but because we have an area attribute, I would say, like, let's sort rectangles based on the amount of area they take on, from like least area to most area. So given a variable that has a list of rectangles, right? It'd be great if we could say, hey, can you sort them for me? Python, sort these. So if we were to pass this list into Python's sorted function, boom, there it is, we would get an error, specifically a type error, and it says that less than is not supported between instances of rectangle and rectangle. And what's really nice is, like, Python, like, I feel like that's a really good descriptive error. But additionally, it's actually giving us a little bit of a clue as to how we can fix this, of how we can actually have our rectangle classes be sorted by Python. And that is this less than character. Python can allow us to opt in to having our classes know about the less than operator, and essentially any operator in Python, I believe. So, given, I didn't realize I made these transitions. I'm sorry, it's taking longer than I expected. So, given our rectangle class with an area, if we want to be able to make our rectangles sortable, there's very little code that we need to add. This is one way we can do it. By adding a __LT__ method. So this looks kind of weird, right? And in a way, it is kind of weird, but it's a neat mechanism that Python gives us to opt into the way Python works. They are called, you'll hear them referred to as either magic methods or dunder methods. Dunder meaning the double underscore that are on either side of the name. So in this case, LT responds to less than. So when, essentially the idea is, like, when Python wants to sort two things, it calls dunder less than or dunder greater than, whichever one you define, it'll call that to determine which one is this one less than the other, or is this one greater than the other. So as you can see here, the parameters to the less than function are the self, essentially the instance of the rectangle class, and other, which is whatever is being compared to it. And so we're saying if our area is less than the other area, then yes, we are less than that other. So now if we were to pass in our list of options into the sorted function, it will sort our rectangle classes just like that. Any questions about that? It's not just less than. Python, there's a ton of options that Python will send you. In fact, do I still have if I have the website open, yes, I'll put it in the chat. And honestly, I bet that Real Python probably has a better example of all the methods that you could do, but like add, addition, or the plus, I should say, the minus is, plus is add, minus is sub, less than is LT, greater than is GT, there's slash, there's double slash. I mean, it's like there's so many things. Length is one thing that Paul just mentioned. You can say like how long, like if you want to change or say how many items or how long your class is, you can do that. It's incredible. There's so many of them. it's oh yeah, you can even say like whether or not your class is truthy. I mean, it's almost like any way that you can think about, like if you're using Python to kind of any operator, like I said, like you can have your class know how to have Python work with it. That is the Paul also just added the book Fluent Python. Has a great example of this. That's awesome. Another great book. Another great book recommendation. Interesting. So he says that the great example is using the French deck. Paul, is that I'm trying to remember, is that the one where he talks about how you could use the shuffle method with it?
The card, yeah. Basically, it's a deck of cards he models as. How do you model that and then use the data model of Python, which is essentially what you're showing here, right? And incorporate the class into the data model and use the functionality that's already implemented in Python to make that object, work well in the environment.
Yeah. And another, I don't know. I wanted to say another book that I really enjoy is called Architecture Patterns in Python. I know it is Cosmic Python because if you go to cosmicpython.com, that's the author's website, and they have the book available for free on it. And they show like how you can create classes that represent, like in their case, like business objects, and because they're sortable and all these things, it made me kind of fall in love with Python over again, because it's such an expressive language. It allows you to create, custom objects that behave like they're normal Python objects, like they're rich, sortable. I wish I could think of something else besides sortable, multipliable. It's a really great programming language. and it helped me to like think more. I felt like it kind of helped me to elevate my coding styles, because like, I don't know, like a lot of times people like say bad things about procedural programming, and it's like, I feel like there's bad ways you can write a bad program in procedural, functional, or object-oriented style, and you can write a great program in those three as well. But like, seeing like how custom objects can like have these superpowers, can opt into like being sortable, or having I don't know. I'm losing other options, but it just so made me enjoy objects so much more and classes so much more, and like see how they could be so much more flexible. I don't know. It really, yeah, it's really fun. I feel like it's bad to say that because I don't have any great examples I can just pull up right now. But like, I don't know. I highly recommend looking into it. That is the end of my presentation. Are there any questions? Well, I'd be happy to. Sorry, I'm trying to do kind of open up something real quick.
Also, it's interesting to note that ints and floats, although we think of them as primitives, they're also objects within Python.
Yes, 100%. Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, there are methods you probably wouldn't call too much on they support certain methods, like you would think addition, it supports the add, an integer supports the add, subtract, comparison methods as well. There's no real class code you can look at that has written these down like you would write for your own class, but they do have certain methods that if you look at it, you can see.
Yeah. 100%. That was one. I feel like that was another thing that was really cool, was looking through the standard library and seeing. In fact, why don't I pull up or at least share it? Because like for a long time, like I knew that Python was open source, but I was like, I don't know where this source is. And then one day, I not only found the repo, but I started understanding like how to dig in to actually see the standard library. And the funny thing is, it's been a while, so I'm hoping I'm clicking yes. So I'm going to share. If you want to look at the standard library, that's it. And like, so if you ever like, in my case, one of my favorite modules is pathlib. And if you click on that link and scroll down, you'll see pathlib. You can click on it and see the code that enables you to have paths and everything. And I learned like, I feel like in some ways it's intimidating, right? Because like this is Python. This is the source code for this language that we're using. But if you like kind of sip it in and like look at it a little bit and kind of take pieces and parts, like you can start learning so much. Like, yes, it's going to be overwhelming, especially at first. But like if you keep revisiting it, you'll start to see and learn things. It's really, really cool. But some things like ints and strings and floats are written in C, so you won't see those in this folder. And other things like datetime are datetime is I think there's a datetime.py. Sure enough, there is datetime.py. But okay, so they changed it, which is good, because I mentored a guy and we were going through datetime.py and there was like a whole. Oh, I see. It's underscore datetime. Sorry, I'm a little confused. PyDatetime? That's probably it. I'm pausing because I want to see if, I don't know, it was definitely datetime, and I'm really curious because I'm looking at pydatetime.py, and I'm wondering if this is the file I saw. I'm not saying what I learned about it, which is like I'm seeing this Python implementation, and it's helped me understand datetime so much better. But like there was a question that we had about it, and I ended up going to the Python discourse forum and asking about it, and they were like, "Oh yeah, by the way, like all that Python code is just for show because at the bottom we import the C code, and that's what actually runs the datetime." So I was like, "Okay, good to know." Like, just because there's Python in the standard library doesn't mean it actually runs all the time. Eric, you're welcome. I think you might have just dropped, but I'm glad you enjoyed this talk. Before anybody else leaves, JetBrains is sponsoring PyRVA, and they have given us a free license to give away to one of their IDEs. So I use PyCharm. I love PyCharm. If you're interested in a free year's subscription to PyCharm, let me know. I'm going to give a free license out to anybody who just says, "Hey, give it to me." And then otherwise, in 2 weeks, we're doing coding night. We'll be back at EPON. So we'll be in person. We have audio issues, so I don't know how. All right, Latha, I'll send you the PyCharm coupon. We actually have 2, so if somebody else wants one, let me know. There you go, Joseph. All right. Sorry, EPON. Yeah, we have a problem with the noise. It's a very echoey room. And so it's not the best experience online, but we're going to still try to stream it anyway and see if we can kind of improve that. So if you can't come out to EPON in Richmond, join us back here on Discord. And I mentioned PyTexas. I saw that Mason had to drop off. I think he had an event as well. That's the 19th. That is the 19th. It is. Yep. I had to look at my calendar. PyTexas, I mentioned, there are a number of great conferences that are coming up. I forgot, if you scroll up in the chat, PyTexas is up there. PyCon is in May 17th, so just a couple of months away. It's in Pittsburgh this year, so it's not super far away. It'll be there this year and next year. If you're a student, I know you get a pretty good discount. If you're an individual, I think it's like a $400 ticket. That gets you into the conference. It gets you breakfast and lunch for every day of the conference. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Deanne. I just saw that he's giving feedback for the in-person streaming. Yeah. PyCon, if you've never been to a Python conference, PyCon is amazing. It's really what turned me from enjoying writing Python to being a fan of Python. The people are amazing. Actually, I met Mason at my first PyCon conference, and he introduced me to some of my Python heroes, and he became one of my Python heroes. It's so cool to meet these people who are just like you and me, but they are making things possible for us, writing the code. It's such a great experience. I feel like I know there are other conferences. I just can't remember them right offhand. Any other questions? Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, Chris, whom did you just mention?
That was PyCon. Let me actually share the...
The PyCon conference, I get it, but I think you mentioned some other person, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Mason was here earlier. He was there. If you scroll up, you'll see...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You were mentioning Mason?
Yeah, Mason Egger. He's a cool guy. He's a great guy. He also is putting on, or one of the people involved with PyTexas. Probably he's not the only one because there's a whole team of people doing some great stuff down there. But yeah, he's a cool guy.
Yeah, like you. I think today is the first time I've interacted with you. Maybe I might have pinged you on Discord earlier, just regarding the event. But yeah, I know Mason like that. I know his name, but I don't know he knows me.
Yeah. Man, it's great. Yeah. I hope you get to meet him in person one day. He's such a great guy. I mean, that's what's great about Python. It's like it's hard to throw a ball in a Python group and have it not hit 5 really cool people. I mean, it's great.
Yep. Yeah, I would say Dean is pretty helpful. I know him. For Python, if at all I ask for help, it's probably Dean is one of them.
Oh, cool.
Help, I usually don't ask for help. I don't know why. I just if I figure it out by myself, I figure it out, else I just let it be, which is not a good thing to do. That is how I am doing it as of now. But I think I must ask one question related to OOPS,
Yeah.
because this is one of those concepts that you only get to know if you do if you actually implement it and use it, right? I have not done any sort of mini project or anything like that.
Mhm.
Is there any suggestion you would give in that direction? Or I know you mentioned couple of the books. I'm
Mhm.
not sure if I should refer some of the OOPS chapter in any one of them to work on some smaller projects as such, or what would you suggest?
Okay, so Paul, Dr. PWJ says Python workbook is excellent. I haven't tried that one, but I think I've heard of that one. One thing that I've used, I'm getting the website up so I can share it. Python Morsels is a website that I'm putting in the chat right now. This was really cool. Like it's a little I'm pausing because I would say it's not necessarily object-oriented programming specifically, but it's really great at like helping you really get deeper into your Python knowledge. It's really cool because it's like the idea how it works is every Monday Python Morsels will email you a challenge, and then I think every Thursday it sends you another email with solutions, and it's essentially almost like a blog post to say like, here are 2 or 3 ways you can solve it, and here are the benefits and the trade-offs for each of those. And he's got actually, do I still have trying to? It's really neat because he has like multiple levels. I'm looking to see if I can. Okay, yeah. So he has at least novice, intermediate, and advanced. He might have more. I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, it's really good. Like, so you can like try one level, and if you try the lowest level and it's a little too easy, you can move up, and it's a great way to progress. Paul also just updated. He meant Python Workout, not Python Workbook, and I have heard of that one. Is that the one by Reuven Lerner? If so, like
Yep.
I've heard great things about that one.
I mean, there's like a 5 to 6 page introduction to the topic, then some exercises. Usually takes about anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes. So you can do it in a day, or a little block of time here and there.
Nice.
Chris, if I may.
Yeah.
Thank you for those suggestions. Oh, sorry, Dion.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Dion.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. The University of Michigan have just recently released a new Python course. They've had no less than 2 series of courses in Python for some time. The first one was done by the rather famous Dr. Chuck, who many of us will know. But they've recently released a new one, and I'm putting it in the chat now. So I have a bit of an issue with Coursera. I'm not sure if this particular course is on Coursera. UMich and Coursera sometimes do the same thing, and sometimes they separate. Okay. I have a bit of an issue with courses online, despite the fact that I actually run some, in that they have the highest dropout rate of all courses.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to do because you work by yourself, you work in isolation. It's like you're locked away in a little box for half an hour a day or half an hour a week or however much time you can put in. And it can be very difficult to stay motivated, particularly when the going gets a bit tough.
Yeah.
So what I've suggested here is a co-op group and which is a little different from a study group that some of us might remember from high school or university, where we gather together to encourage each other, to take care of some of those issues of working alone.
Mhm.
Whilst at the same time we register to do the course, we do the course in our own time, which in some people's cases means that they're going to make rapid progress and the rest of us tend to be a bit slower. But that doesn't matter, because what we will just do is gather, and we won't be talking about necessarily what we've done this week. We won't be expecting that everybody has done it this week, but we will be there to help each other and to as I say, just keep things chugging along, even if life and the universe and everything gets in the way.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds great. That's like it's I highly recommend that. Like that's great. Like I've done some online, I've led some online workshops, and I find like the ones that where you're like creating a cohort of people and having them work together, those work so much better. Absolutely. The camaraderie, the making, just having people join in. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. That sounds great. It's like in some ways we wanted to do that with PyRVA. That's why we have the coding nights. We try to have like kind of an inclusive thing where we do ensemble coding, and it works great, especially if we're only online or only in person. I feel like crossing over, we are having trouble with that so far, but it's also only once a month. So I feel like a co-op course would be much better. Are you looking to like try to get one together to have people join in?
Yes, but following on from your point, putting a course together, and as you know from just putting this session together and all the care and attention you put into preparing the slides, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
So the idea that each individual Python user group has somebody who puts a whole course together and invests an enormous amount of effort is just crazy. Most of us don't have that sort of time. So all the hard work's been done by you, Mitch. All we have to do is gather together. So your question, are we thinking of putting something together? And that is exactly right. We are. Really, it's a case of if we get a group of people together and we all say, yeah, we want to meet in the evening, or we want to meet during lunch break, or we want to meet at the weekend, that sort of thing. If we can get a coalesce around a particular set of arrangements, we'll just start meeting as a group.
Yeah. And if I'd be happy to help out any way I can. So like if you want to like kind of organize through PyRVA on this Discord, that'd be great. If there's another way, PyRVA can help support that, let me know.
Appreciate that. Thank you. In fact, I've put the link to the UMich courses, which is now towards the top of the text chat. And about 2/3 of the way down, I put a link to co-op outline document. Now, if I remember rightly, I better go and check myself. That includes my email, so people can get in touch with me and say, yeah, I'm interested. And there's two types of people you correctly identified for me. And the first is people who want to learn. That's the obvious one. But the more people we have who are like yourself, Chris, who understand Python already and who can act as mentors or coaches, answer the more difficult questions, the better. I mean, that it's all community.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, let me see too. Like, trying to think if there's another way that we can like pin this, or you know what? Yeah, maybe I'll make see if I can copy these and make I can put them in one of the other channels where like people can see it.
Yeah, and also maybe you could include it in the slides towards the end, saying, after the meeting, links, or I don't know what's the word, like resources that were discussed after the meeting, sort of a thing.
Yeah.
So it stays in the Google Docs like for longer also, and Discord also we can add it. Thank you,
We
Dean,
can
for sharing about the
no problem, Lata. Yeah, Chris, we can talk about that afterwards if you like.
Yeah, that sounds great.
I had two other things that I wanted to talk about. One is, I wanted to thank, Chris and Paul for sharing those two resources. I think Python morsels, I have to just subscribe through my email. And then for Python workout, I probably have to purchase that book on Manning, is what I'm wondering now.
I think so.
I'll look into those two.
There are also,
Okay.
you remind me, there are also some good websites that are free that are like Exercism. It's spelled differently than you think, so let me put that into the
I've heard of that website, but never used it yet. But LeetCode, I've been doing on and off.
Which was that? Sorry?
LeetCode?
LeetCode? Okay. Yeah, I'm not familiar with that one, but yeah. So you like, I feel like you mentioned OOP practice in particular, and like I'm trying to think of what, like I was trying to think of specifically though, like a lot of places will kind of include exercises that have an OOP flavor to them, but they won't necessarily say like this is an OOP exercise. But I feel like just finding problems to solve and just practicing like that's going to help you grow not only in object-oriented programming but in Python as well. Is just like there's the idea of the code kata, which is essentially like just a problem like Roman number generator, like converting integers into Roman numbers. There's a whole ton of these katas that the point is just set up a timer for half an hour and just code and do it again, another day or something like that. And just practicing like this just will increase your skills so quickly. Ben, I'm sorry I'm overwhelming you with great resources.
Put all these up on a website somewhere.
Yeah. Trying to find like it's funny, like there was a website that I used to use that had a lot of code katas in it, and I can't find the specific one, but it's easy.
Yeah, the thing that I've noticed with me is with books, I don't get through the book. Maybe I lack the self-discipline. I don't know what it is. But when I do learn concepts, I try to learn them how much of a depth possible. I mean, it's a breadth versus depth struggle for me always. But how much ever I learn, I make sure I have some clarity in there. But still with the books, I feel like I don't do justice with it. Like going through the full chapters, I might do, but going through the full assignments, I don't do that most times.
Mm-hmm. Sure. I hear you. Yeah, honestly, like I feel like that happens for me too. Like the books that have really had the biggest impact on me are the ones where I will slow down and like dig in and work with their code. Like it's funny, like I have Brian Ockens' book. I haven't hardly started this version of it, but I had the first version, and it like I downloaded his code and I worked with it, and it helped me understand PyTest. I mentioned Cosmic Python. A lot of these books that I think that's one thing that helps me is like when a book has code online on GitHub that you can download and kind of play with, then that helps me. But not I don't go through a lot of programming books that often because like it's hard to pick up the knowledge, there's especially like I don't know, like there are books you read for fun, and then there are books that can help you program, and you just got to be in the right frame of mind. You got to be in the right like phase of life too, like sometimes you're just not going like I think Fluent Python, I put it on my Kindle and I was like, I'm going to read straight through this. And I think I made it through like 3/4 of it, and I just put it down, and that's fine. Like you'll be able to go back to them. You'll learn.
Yeah, no, your excuse is still justifiable, I think, compared to mine. With me, I'm not sure. I can't pinpoint why I do that. But yeah, if I'm starting a book, I do want to make sure I get through those exercises completely because that's the whole point of even starting that book, right? So yeah, like in the ones that I got the suggestions today, uh, Python morsels that seems like pretty much like lead code, problem set, and stuff. So I should be pretty okay following their challenges or trying out that because the person who does it, Trey, no, I don't remember his name.
Trey
Is it
Hunter.
Trey? Yeah.
Yeah.
So he probably has organized them well so that I could grasp things or check my knowledge if I have done something wrong. Through the explanation, I might learn. So I'm going to start with that for sure.
Yeah.
I'll check out Python workout, how it is, and how can I go about it. If not all the chapters, at least if I can target the ones that I feel I am not good at. I'm not good at many of it in Python, but still, oops is one of them.
Hmm.
So I'll do that with those two. And then, yeah, DN was suggesting some of the group discussion sort of a thing. If that happens, I will join that as well. Lastly, I see Code Wars. Yeah, I don't know how that is different compared to Lead Code, but yeah, I should check that out.
Yeah, they all have their own little kind of styles and stuff. Yeah. Yeah, automate the boring stuff's a good one too. The thing I really like about Python morsels too is like it has that like weekly cadence where it's like you've got 2 or 3 days to like solve it, and then you get an email. It's like, here are the solutions. Here are ways you can solve it. And yeah, I feel like some like I wish I could remember. There are some websites that I've used in the past which I really like, but like some of them is like you have to solve the problem first before you can get any help, and sometimes you just can't. Yeah.
Oh yeah, in Lead Code they do give you the hints and stuff like that. But yeah, for some of them you're better off seeing them. I think that's
Yeah.
how the problems are. At least for me, for some medium ones. But yeah, even after solving, it's still nice to look at those hints because that would give you most times another way of doing it. So their hints are pretty good. But like you mentioned a book of PyTest. Was it Oken's book or was it a different one?
It was Aachen. Yep.
Okay. I've just started with PyTest as well, very little fixtures and stuff like that, pretty basic. But I haven't been following the book yet. I should probably because
Well,
that book is little different than others, right?
so can you say that again? Ask that again.
That book is little different from others. It's like pretty hands-on, and it's not like I'll get bored when I'm doing it. Is what the feedback I read somewhere. So I'm thinking of referring to that book.
Yeah.
If I may,
Yeah, please.
hi. I just realized that there was this lady a few years ago in the PyRVA group who was in a similar situation as yourself, Latha. And I think she got a lot of good advice from you guys, and she leveled up in Python well enough to at least get a job, and I think she really enjoys it. I was suggesting that this lady might be also a good resource, as in what worked for her might also work for you.
Oh wow, I would be happy to just introduce myself and connect because I feel maybe DN can talk about how I prepare or something. I do try to ask the right questions, at least so that if I'm struggling somewhere, just so that I can get clarity. And then sometimes maybe I'm struggling with those projects and stuff like that because I'm being self-learning, not following any course as such. Though I've got some suggestions to follow some courses, but I don't know. I haven't been doing that. So, like Tanim, right? I hope I'm saying his name correctly.
Yeah, you you friended me on Discord actually. Yes, Tanim.
Yeah, I think I sent you the request when I joined. I forgot the name of the organizer of the meetup. Mm,
Chris?
no, not this meetup. The Brazen one.
Are you
Uh,
SACPI or
Yes.
757 PUG? Because it looks like there are
Correct.
3 mutual servers.
So I don't remember the full name of the organizer. That is where I'd met you first time, I think. I
Okay.
remember sending a request, but initially I had been hesitant even in asking for help, right? I was just working on myself. Even now, I am hesitant. Maybe sometimes I do speak up in the meetups. This is the first time I'm speaking in PyRVA, if I'm not wrong.
I don't know.
So,
We've chatted, so I'm wondering. Well, either way, yeah, doesn't matter.
we have, maybe I joined Discord once. This time, most times I'm not able to attend, but I make sure at least to watch the recording for the topics I need and stuff like that. But Tanin, really thank you for sharing that, because my goal is ultimately, currently that, right, to level up in Python such that I can clear the job interviews. Like just yesterday in another meeting, which was about interview preparation and stuff like that, there was this guy who works at Tesla. He was talking about how he selects people for his team and whatnot. It was pretty scary. I mean, I knew it before, but then I think he just confirmed it. He said, like, if 100 resumes come, right, for a position, if they just need one person for their team, and then there are 100 resumes that come, the HR first filters out the resume, saying, okay, these are the best 10. And then the team goes through looking at that and chooses like couple of them for the interview. So out of 100, how quickly it came down to those 6 or 7 people who got scheduled for the interview. Even if it is 10, it just happened, right? It's not even the technical person. It's the HR who did it. And this is the Tesla interview process. So that pretty much threw me off yesterday. I'm like, if that's the case, I better prepare myself such that if I'm asking someone for reference, right? Up until now, I've never asked anybody for referral in US. But if I were to ask, I have to be so much more prepared. Like in 2022, when I applied, I just did it on my own. When we came out of COVID, many people were hiring. I got calls, but lately I don't think that is happening when I have tried, and I don't know how it will be down this year.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I would say is that, Tesla is a very special company, right? Like a lot of people want to work there. And so, they have, like, I know, I don't know what it's like at Tesla. I had a friend who worked at a similar company, and they put in a job ad, and they got thousands of people applying for the job. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's similar at Tesla. So it's like, kind of what we're saying, it's like hard to get into. But I feel like I want to encourage you in that, like, not every company is like that. It is, I think you're good. It's good that you want to try to get recommendations, because like what I've found in my own career and in a lot of the careers of my friends, is that it's really who you know. So building relationships like through PyRVA or other, online forums or in-person ones, and practicing, like, or especially if you can contribute to open source, anything open source, Django or any library you may use. That, like, I feel like the two of those together will help you. Hopefully, will help you get a job, because it's like the people will kind of, the larger your network is, the more likely you are to like find somebody who knows somebody at a company that wants a Python developer. And the more practice you have, and the more open source contributions you can give, that's more, proof to the interviewer that you know Python and that you are a good developer. Granted, there's still companies out there that are going to have like crazy interview techniques and like whiteboarding drills, and you may pass some of those, you may not. There was a company that I applied at that I was there for almost the entire day interviewing and had to do whiteboarding stuff. By the end, I didn't want the job because it was just such a taxing thing, and I apparently just barely missed out on the position. But I'm so glad that I didn't get it because I didn't like it. But yeah,
I understand what you're trying to say, but unfortunately, I'm not there. I'm not there where I can make the choices. I just want to prepare for that worst case. Like if they have whiteboarding, if they want to do me space or time analysis, mainly what scares me is I haven't at all been preparing for that thing. The first one that they give, take home assignment. I don't know how those questions look. Only one I've heard from a friend. I hope I can say because that's not the company I interviewed for, and I don't even know the company name. So the take-home question was like that. You know the calculator thing? Nowadays, people use this WX widgets library. So the question was they have to use that, and then probably I have not seen the full question. It's just what I heard. So they had like this big description where they describe what are the features or that the calculator should have, and you have to implement it. So that day I looked up this RPN thing, reverse polish notation, and then I looked up one other thing related to that, which I can't remember. Oh, that infix, postfix sort of operator processing, like expression processing, right? So these sort of things I looked at, and I'm like, after I looked, it seemed like, okay, I can understand the concept, but I have to still go and implement it. But if I get those take-home quizzes, like, can we Google stuff and all? And then yesterday, in the Tesla thing, I heard that in the take-home quiz, sometimes the interviewers can get to know how much time you're spending with your mouse on the cursor there, on the take-home quiz browser, or how much time you're away from it.
Sure.
So-
I mean, I haven't had an interview like that, but I know that there are things like that, I feel like it all depends on the company and the job, right? I don't know. Yeah. Like
but that monitoring is fine. I'm not even worried about it. That's one thing that I just got to know. But the first thing about having those, it's not lead code. It's a little more than that. Maybe hard level lead code problems are like that, but I haven't been doing the hard ones. I struggle with even the medium. So these projects, take-home quizzes that they give, I feel I have to prepare myself for it somehow, either through these mini projects, like I was trying to mention about OOPS, right? What if take-home projects have where I have to build them? That's my thinking that these might help me in that direction. But yeah, I don't know any website where those take-home questions, similar questions could be there. Like lead code is for those whiteboarding or typical coding interview rounds, right?
I mean, I feel like it depends, honestly. Like every company is different. When I've never interviewed, like the companies I've worked for never had like elite code style interview question. Maybe one job that I applied for had one, so yeah, like it really varies. Like one of the positions I was a part of interviewing with, we hardly asked any Python questions, which I thought was kind of interesting, and honestly, it's interesting too, because like it's one of those things, like interviewing is hard from both sides because the interviewer, the hirer, like a lot of people use these exercises as a way to say like, oh, how good is the programmer, but it doesn't show anything about like how good you are at communicating or how well you are at a number of different things. And I think so there are a lot of jobs out there that don't have stuff like that, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I understand. That's where I feel, am I preparing wrong sometimes? When even some lead code problems, right? When I hit obstacles, I'm like, how can this be so difficult? And do they really ask this in interview? No, it's actually not difficult in reality. It's difficult for me, right? Because I know people grind lead code like anything. And then when I've heard them explain, it is scary, but then they've prepared themselves like that. They have seen so many questions, same pattern. They just recognize it like tick of the minute, right? They just see it. Okay, they're like, oh, I know this problem, but I'm not there. So when I do hit obstacles, I'm like, if they're not going to ask me this, am I better off doing something else during my preparation? So I don't know those things, but I'm seeing in the chat there is Paul has mentioned about math. I've been doing a little bit of it because obviously undergrad had like 4 semesters of math, 4 courses, right? But I've forgotten all of it. I hadn't been using them. So like probability and stuff, I just went over it last Saturday, hoping it might help me with some lead code problems. So I'm trying to learn, review math I knew. So that I'm doing because coding lead code problems, they do boil down to math many times. And then that math for figuring out the algorithm. But after that comes the challenge where you have your algorithm, you think it's working, can you implement it in code? I do struggle there because I'm just learning Python. And GitHub profile. Yeah, really good things in the chat.
It's I feel so, my heart goes out to you because I feel like I don't know how many times you interviewed or where you've interviewed, but like I feel like you're concerned about a lot of things that a lot of jobs don't ask.
This is what it is. Like for me, that worst case, right? I want to be prepared for the worst case. I don't want to put myself in an interview and then like bomb it or something, and then
no. You've got to at least bomb one. Get like literally every time, like if I lose a job, I've gotten laid off a couple times. I purposefully find an interview that I can bomb because it gets it out of the way. Like once, like it's almost like a practice interview, and I prepare, I get ready, but like I go in with the intention of like I'm not going to stress about this because this job isn't important enough for me to care about. And if I bomb it, then great, because I get that behind me, and now my mind's in it. And I've actually gotten really great jobs by doing that. But yeah, don't worry about bombing. Like there are, I don't know. Like I feel like as a developer, we have it's a little bit harder these days, but like we do have more opportunities to get a new job, and especially if you can find one that just isn't like a. I think the key is don't try to look for a job that's your dream job. Just find one that like could work, that seems nice. Apply for it and be open to bombing. It really like lifts a weight off your shoulders. At least my shoulders, I would say.
I must mention one point. Earlier you said about live coding. I didn't know I was scared of it up until I did it. And then I did such a mistake. I had to like literally go back and think, why did I do that mistake? If I tell here, probably every one of you will ask, do I even know anything about programming? So that sort of mistake, like I can still say it for some weird reason. The way I wrote my nested for loop, right, in Python was really weird. Like you have to have one variable in a for loop and then another variable in the nested one, right? Like I will be in one level and J will be in another level if you have 2 nested for loops. Some reason I just wrote a for loop where for I comma J, because I was doing live coding. I shared my screen and then it's like my mind wasn't there.
Sure. I mean, you saw me earlier. I wrote bad live code, and I even had the slide up. I just couldn't read it. Live coding is like live coding is bad coding, and that's one reason why, like, if a company requires me to do live coding, I think the best thing you can do if an interview requires you to do live coding and whiteboarding is to explain your thought process, because you're going to write bad code and just accept it. Thank you, Deanne. We'll get back. I'll connect with you about the thing you brought up.
I think definitely. I plus one on what you said, Chris, is when you're in an interview and you're talking through the code, you are showing how you think, and that's what they're really looking for. How do you think? How do you think through problems? It's not, coming in with a right answer. How do you think through problems, and can you see something? And can you respond to feedback? If they say, well, maybe you should try this, and you think, oh yeah, this is the way. It's not that you're getting everything right. It's that can you respond to feedback? And if you consistently say, no, I'm right, this is the way, and you're not responding to their feedback, they're there to help generally.
Yeah. True. And today I actually feel happy that I attended, because many times on Discord, when it is in person, the interaction is not as today, right? And I think, okay, if I had another thing to do, I'm like, I will watch the YouTube video and then make sure I go through it, right? But today, because I saw Oops, and I was like, I have to attend it, as I'm not good at it. Now that I got to meet folks here, I'm just glad for doing that. And yeah, especially thanks to Paul, Tanim, and Dean already logged off for all the resources that were shared. I hope I'm going to at least rigorously start with one or two of them. But yeah, I think even Paul is dropping off.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go too.
Yeah.
My wife is gonna be heading to sleep bed, and I need to follow her shortly behind.
Good night. Nice meeting everybody virtually.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. If I may ask one thing from Tanim, he suggested some person who was a little bit in similar situation as me and who did end up getting a Python job rather sooner than what my plan is going on. So how would you suggest, Tanim? Should I reach out to you later on Discord in this regard?